Okay then guys, so I think we're ready to begin. So today we're talking about Reading Future Develop. So that's this book just here. So this book's now available. So today we're talking about teaching 21st century reading with this book, Reading Future. Okay, so let's jump straight in. Now, so what we're seeing here is our Santa Claus platform, and this is where we can see the ebooks. So I wanted to start here because I want to start by just diving straight into the book and having a good look at it. So this is one of my favorite units here, cleaning up space garbage. So I just want you to imagine for a moment that you are a young student and you're just coming into class. So you're ready to learn, you're ready to discover, you're ready to find out new things. And these days, with lots of technology and lots of kind of games and things like this, kids in their free time are exploring things, looking at things that are very dynamic, very exciting in their free time. So think about it this way: lots of kids come into class, and if they're studying from a book, maybe for them that's not as exciting as the things they're looking at in their free time. So what we've done here is try and create something which will be very engaging, very attractive, something that will draw the kids in straight away. So as we can see here, we have a very bold and striking image, and you know, as a kid this will conjure up a lot of questions. You know, where have you seen these kind of images before? Maybe in films, maybe in games. What do you know about this? What do you know about space? And what do you know about astronauts and satellites and all the things you can see here? So immediately it asks lots of questions to the children. They're asking themselves, and they're going to want to know more about these things. And the great thing here is we can jump straight into a YouTube video on the ebook here. We actually have a link with the YouTube icon, and
this video is supported by
it jumps straight into a video.
Space junk floating around in space. Floating is probably not the right word to use because every one of them is traveling at over 20 times the speed of a bullet in space. Okay. Floating is probably not the...
Okay, so that was just a small sample, and the idea here is for every unit, for every topic, we have some different engaging videos, and these videos again are going to immediately draw the kids in. They're going to engage with the subject, they're going to start thinking about and asking more questions. So let's jump back to the book here. One moment please. Okay then. So we're back, we're taking a look. So the first stage, really getting the kids' attention, really activating what they already know, getting them asking questions. And then we lead into lots of new words, new vocabulary. And again, the idea is the images will be able to explain a lot about the concepts and the ideas here, and just bring the new vocabulary to life and really make it meaningful for the kids in a very immediate and very striking way. And then it leads through, and we have the reading, which is of course the core as a reading book. Now everything's set them up for this reading, and the reading is going to teach them a lot about the subject for each unit, and here cleaning up space garbage. Now the rest of the unit are questions which will help the students to unravel, to decipher, and to gain a lot more about the subject that we're talking about. Okay, so let's move on. We're going to come back to the unit and we're going to look at this section by section and break it down. But first of all, I want to jump back out. So, as many of you know, Develop is the latest section, the latest part in our Reading Future program. And so already available, and I think many of you have worked with before. We begin with Starter, and this is for kindergarten level as we can see here, and all the way through to Create. And now Create goes up to grade 8. So we have the full range of age groups, the full range of levels here. And the reading feature, Develop, goes right in the middle, and this is targeted at grade 3 and grade 4. Now, what we've got here are a series of books which deal with topics and deal with language which is relevant to each level building as it goes. So the books here actually will grow with the students as they develop in terms of their experiences and also in terms of their knowledge, the things they've learned as they go through school. So I just want to talk a little bit about how these books develop all the way through from Starter through to Create, and including our topic today, Develop. So we can see here with Starter, we've got one of the topics here is lunchtime. And this is a good example of what's in this book. We're talking about practical everyday topics, basic vocabulary and familiar concepts. So these are things that for very young children, they're daily activities, daily experiences, and they're learning to talk about these things in English and gain the vocabulary, the language they need to talk about those things. When we move through to the older age groups to Develop, we're talking more about fact-based topics and about building research skills. Now, building these research skills is a very core part of our projects, and the projects are something we're going to talk about in depth a bit later on. And then through to Create. Now, we can see here the topic is the time machine. So here we're talking about abstract topics. So really thinking about very creative ideas, things which the students need to use a lot of imagination and creativity to think about and to conceptualize. Okay. So I think a good place to look at how the books develop is these kind of questions. And if we look at one of the types of questions in Starter, it has a very strong scaffold. And what this means is the students are engaging with the language, engaging with building sentences, but in a very, very controlled way. So for example, here we have 3 target words, and then we have 3 sentences. So all they need to do is use the pictures and then put the words into the relevant gaps. And of course the reading supports this task, so they can look back at that as well. So extremely controlled and very easy for the students to engage with. And as you can also see, we have the structure here, so the students can have help with actually writing the words, which is something at this age, kindergarten, that they'll be grappling with. Okay, and then we move across to Develop, which is our book we're talking about today. Now, as you can see, we've got 3 gaps, 4 words. So we've got 1 distractor word. It makes it a little bit more difficult. The students need to analyze a little more, think about which words fit in which gaps, think about the structures that we have here. So a big build, as you can see. And then we look at Create. And this is where the scaffold, the structure, has been removed completely, and the students need to think a lot more freely and to understand the structure of the sentences. And again, they can use the reading to support this, but a lot more free production here. So we can see that the books build and they develop with the students. Okay, and here we have the projects, and again, this is something we're going to talk about a lot more as we go through the presentation, a very important core part of the book. So we can see for Starter, we have a task here, very visual and cognitive development. So because students are in this age group, this is kindergarten, these are the skills they're developing at the time. So what we're doing is we are encouraging students to use the knowledge they've gained through the lesson and also build these basic skills. Okay, and then we talk about develop. So for develop, as we were talking about earlier, this is a lot more about building research and analytical skills and talking about very relevant topics for this age group. And also when we're talking about 21st century reading, it's very important for developing that knowledge. So here we're talking about some relevant real-world topics. So here, for example, is keeping your environment clean. So, of course, a very key and crucial topic right now. Okay, and so the idea here is that students are researching online, and then they'll be creating a poster about their knowledge to present to the class. Again, we'll come back to this a little bit later, and we'll talk more about the kind of skills we're developing with projects. Now with create, the highest level, we can see that it's a lot more abstract and creative thinking. So here the students have to use images and to finish a story. So this is something which they have to create independently, and they have to be very imaginative. So again, we can see a clear build through the different levels. Okay, so what I want to talk about now then is a few of the concepts behind the book, how we built this book up. Okay, so here we have a framework for 21st century learning. Now, 21st century learning is one of the bases of this book and something that we built the structure around. Now, we can see in the center we have our key subjects. It's talking about the 3 R's, so reading, writing, arithmetic. And these have been cause of education for many decades now. And of course these are at the core, and then we're building on these 21st century themes. So if we look to the outside of the circle here, these are 3 of the key sections we're going to talk about now. So we're talking about life and career skills. So for children these days, it's very important that they gain the knowledge in class that will help them in the real world. And then we're talking about learning and innovation skills, the 4 C's, critical thinking, communication, collaboration, creativity. Now these are very important to the book and very important to the projects. Again, we're going to dig further into those. And the last thing here, we're talking about digital literacy, and it's one of the things that many people, it's one of those catchwords these days, and it, of course, is very important. And this goes back to the structure of the book, embedding things like YouTube videos and also having projects where students need to research online. So it's building those kind of digital skills into the program itself. Okay, so again, one of these kind of watchwords of the past few years, talking about the 4th Industrial Revolution. But of course this is very important for how we develop the lessons, how we build topics which are going to be relevant to the students and to help them build up the skills they need for real life. So when we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, really here we're talking about things like artificial intelligence, augmented reality, robotics, and other related changes. So these are certainly things that we need to talk about. These are topics we need to talk about, but we also need to talk about the skills that will allow students to interact with these new technologies and to function in workplaces that need these kind of technologies. So we can see here we have some of these life and career skills that students will be expected to have in the coming years. Flexibility and adaptability, initiative and self-direction, social and cross-cultural skills, productivity and accountability, leadership and responsibility. So these are all things which we've tried to include in our units to help the students as they move forward. Okay, so we have a little bit more information here, which I'll just cover very briefly. So when we're talking about 21st century topics, these are a few of the core topics, and these are topics which we certainly look at in the text. Language arts, global awareness, financial, economic, business and entrepreneurial literacy, and civic health and environmental literacy. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit more about information and media technology. So we're talking about information literacy. So earlier we were talking about digital literacy, using computer technology and building up skills to be able to engage in upcoming technologies such as AI and AR. But information literacy is just as important. Being able to read media and to be able to decipher meaning from media, and also to be able to look at sources, how trustworthy things are, and of course these are very core skills. Okay, so again, talking about the themes, the 21st century themes that we've included in the book. This is the book 1 in the Develop series. We've included history and science and physical education and social studies. So these are all core 21st century topics and will help to build 21st century skills. So here we've got 2 of the units which form this book. Amazing Ancient Egypt. So as we talked about earlier, this is a very fact-based and known topic, and it's all about students researching and building their knowledge of this topic. Then we have the future of home security. So again, learning about the development of home security and the technology involved, CCTV, and also other computer-aided security technology. And then also encouraging students to think about the future, how these things will develop. So we're asking students to really be creative and to come up with new ideas, and to also think about why these things are important and what are the possible positives and negatives of these things. So again, we're building the full range of skills here. So let's think a bit more about those 4 C's. So first of all, we have critical thinking. So here we have how to protect your home. So related to the previous topic we're talking about here, the future of home security. So in the future, jobs will require a lot more expert thinking, complex communication. Whereas when in the past we're talking about lots of factory jobs where the task is very known, it's repetitive, and it's just about controlling the quality. In the future, there'll be a lot more jobs where creativity is involved and problem solving. So this is where this critical thinking really comes in. So here we have a task, and this project is talking about how to protect your home. So thinking about what animal or device you would use to protect your home. So again, you're getting students to think about what is possible. So what technology exists, what technology could exist that could protect the home, and then you're asking them to communicate. So we're sharing with a classmate. So talking through it, how would it work? Why would it work? Why is it necessary? Okay, and of course, depending on the level of the class, will depend on how, to what extent, to what level they can talk about these things. But again, it's about building those skills, building self-questioning within the students. So moving ahead, they can think about topics more freely, more laterally. Okay, so next up, we're thinking a little bit about creativity. So again, this is one of these 4 C's. And there's a great little quote here. We may not all be Dali or Degas, but today we must all be designers. So what that means is we're not all going to be renowned artists or creators, but in our everyday life, in our everyday work, we do need to be creative. We do need to have those skills in order to problem solve effectively. So here we have two very key words, being original and being inventive. With modern technology developing so quickly, students, workers and people in their own lives are going to have to think about how to use these things in a very effective way. And again, I think this is very important. Being creative also means making mistakes. So teaching students to be able to be willing to make mistakes, to be able to analyze their own work and to be able to build on it, to be able to make it better, I think is very important. So we have quite a good example here. So inventing a new solution. So this goes back to the first unit we were talking about, space debris. Now students have to create their own invention. And they're thinking about basic details, the name, the description, how it works, and then also designing an image. Now this might be a topic which the students haven't known much about before the lesson begun. So you're asking them to be very creative with a problem that you've just given them. And this is very good for them to be creative, to think about what they've learned, their previous knowledge, and maybe things they've seen in games and in videos, in movies. And it then also allows them to make mistakes with these ideas and then to work with other students in the class, to collaborate, to create better ideas, and then to present their idea in a convincing way to the class. Okay, and communication, our third C. So as you can see, all of these skills are connected together. So you'll be thinking critically, you'll be creative, and you'll also be working with others and communicating with others, because in the world of work, it's important, of course, to be critical and to be creative, but you need to be able to communicate those ideas to others and the people that you need to work with. So, really, in the lessons, we're teaching students to inform, to instruct, to motivate, and to persuade. And it's also important to talk about the way in which technology is changing the way we communicate. And it's also key that students know how communication has developed in the past. So we've got one project here, writing in hieroglyphics. So a very different form of writing, a very different form of language. And exploring this in a very basic way, using symbols to then create a short conversation or to create a few words into a sentence which a partner or a friend will decode. Now, what this does is really help students to understand that their communication does develop and it will develop, and it helps students to really think about how and why communication is developing in the way it is. Okay, and our final one here is collaboration. So again, really connected with communication, working together to be able to achieve aims. So we've got a good example here. So this project is really based on questioning someone else rather than thinking and writing down your own ideas. So this is very important, of course, in the classroom. Get them working together, and it allows the students to question and ask more questions, to talk about the whys and the hows in a very free way. And this is something we definitely need to encourage. Okay, so one moment. Okay, so what I want to do now is go back to the unit and talk about everything section by section and really break it down. So we've done a very brief look at the aesthetics and the general ideas. So let's talk about how the book really works. So again, as we talked about, very bold imagery is very important because it draws the students in. It really gets them thinking about what's happening here. What do they know about this? What does it mean to them? And these are questions that you're going to want to encourage students. This kind of self-questioning is very important. Now, this is what we call the topic introduction page. So before each section, and each section has 4 units, we have one topic introduction. So here we're talking about careers, the future of jobs, and here we have the academic objectives. What are the students going to learn? What kind of skills and knowledge? And also a couple of questions to warm up the class, to warm up the students to the topic. So this is a great page just for inspiring the students, getting them thinking, and it's also a great place for you to expand on ideas yourself. So maybe you look at this picture, you see that cars are being produced by robots. Maybe you want to expand it and ask students to brainstorm what other items, objects in their day-to-day lives are created in factories using automation, using robots, things like this. So you could expand this in many different directions. Okay, and then we move into one of the units themselves. So this one is about automation, and how this begins is we start with, again, a small warm-up. As we talked about before, you can expand this and you can talk about these questions with the class. You can have them talk about these questions as a group. And then we move into the new vocabulary, listening and matching. So as we spoke about previously, we have the pictures here, and this really helps the students to visualize the meaning of the words and to really get a clear idea of how these words are used. And when this is combined with the text itself, where our target words are all highlighted, it means that when the students are reading, they can look back at the images, and it can really help to illustrate the piece of writing and to really bring it to life and to make the meaning clearer when some of the other vocabulary or the sentences may be a little difficult at this time before we work into them. And again, we've got another image here, and it helps to highlight the meaning of this text. What is the general idea? Okay, and then we move down to vocabulary skills and reading skills at the bottom. So taking a brief look at the text and answering some different questions to do with the vocabulary and to do with the reading. Okay, and then we move into the full comprehension section, and this is really where students are going to question the text, and they're really going to get a deeper understanding of the meaning. And we also have the reading skills, and here we use a graphic organizer, and we'll speak about this separately a little bit later on. This is a very core part of the unit. So here we have the vocabulary review. So going back to our keywords that we've learnt, our key vocabulary at the start, this is where, again, we're going to check understanding of those meanings. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit about these graphic organizers. Okay, so graphic organizers are important because they highlight information and they help students to understand the relationship with different parts of information in the text. So all of this is based on the passage, but it helps the students to organize that information into a way that's much easier to understand. So they can break it down, and when they go back to the passage, reread, it will give them a new understanding of the structure and the connection between different sentences and different ideas there. So what we've got here is main ideas and details. So this is one of the most common type of graphic organizers we use, and a lot of our passages are built around this. We have one core idea, one key topic, and then that's broken down into different details about this topic. As we've discussed before, we have a number of words, 4 words, 3 gaps, so the students really have to think about the sentences, they have to think about which words fit structurally and also thematically. So moving through, we'll talk about a few of our other graphic organizers that we have. So here we have summarizing. So again, this is a very useful type of graphic organizer. Students break down the text, break down the passage into the underlying factors. And again, this helps students with self-questioning. What is the text about? Who is mentioned? When did it happen? How did this event happen? And why? So it's asking students all of those core questions. And this is something we want to encourage students to do when they look at a passage the first time. So these graphic organizers are teaching students skills that they will need when they're moving ahead with the book and reading things in their general life. And then we're talking about classifying. Many of our passages are about one topic, but different items or different parts of that topic. So here we can see one's skills for future jobs, broken down into social media, mobile analytics, and cloud computing. And this also helps students to compare these different tools. And this is something they may not have done the first time they looked at the passage. They might just see a lot of information about different things. This helps to see them side by side and really helps them to build these kind of mental models. So when they look at passages in the future, they'll be able to see the comparison themselves. Okay, and sequencing, another very useful type of graphic organizer when we're talking about changes over time. So in this case, we're talking about the adventure of Raoul Amundsen and his travels across the Northwest Passage. And it's talking about how his adventures developed over time and the different things he did. And we use this in other ways, talking about how inventions have changed over time. There's another passage in the book about the development of computer technology and talking about the different stages in that, all the way from the 30s through to personal computers, robotics, and now through to AI. And finally here, activating prior knowledge. Again, this is something that we're aiming to do every single unit with the pictures and the videos. And this helps students to really break that down. What did they know when they came into the lesson? What did they want to know from the lesson? And also, what did they learn? What was new from the lesson? If students can learn to do this on their own and to break this down, then it's going to give them a lot of motivation because they'll be able to clearly see how this lesson has really helped them develop. Okay, and that takes us through to the workbook. And the workbook's all about the students really practicing and honing those skills that they learnt during the lesson itself. So first of all, we've got vocabulary. So we've got our vocabulary words, and we're doing this puzzle here. And the idea here is, of course, to really engage their interest and to add a kind of engaging element to the task of learning vocabulary. And also we have the secret word here. So again, it gives an added incentive, an added motivation to finish this puzzle and to find this secret word. Then we have the sentence check. So again, all these sentences are from the reading, and the passage is there to support everything in this text and in this workbook. So here they need to put the sentences in the correct order, and then we move across to slightly more challenging questions. So here we have two sentences and only one of them is true, and they have to decipher which one's true factually, and they can again look back to the passage to discover and to remind themselves about which is correct. And again, very importantly, we have images to help students to visualize the topic and to think about the story that they've read, the passage that they've read, and how does that relate to these true and false sentences. Okay, and then finally we have the summary. So this is a very good way to check that the students understand the text and understand the vocabulary. Students need to place the vocabulary in a summary of the original passage, and the sentences, the structure is altered. So what it's going to do is help to show students how structures change and how they relate to the original passage. Okay. So next I want to talk a little bit about the digital materials, and I want to take a bit of a deep dive into this. I think this is very crucial and very core part of what's provided in the book here. And what we're going to look at is the ebook on Santaklás. So let's move across there. Yes. Okay. So what I want to do first of all, excuse me, okay, so here we can see the ebook on Santaklás itself, and what I'd like to do is take you back to the first step. So some of you, I'm sure, are very familiar with Santaklás. Some of you probably use it a lot, and some of you maybe not so much. So really I want to encourage you to use it. Completely free to sign up, and it really gives you a lot of added functionality to the book, things that you can use in class which are really going to make the class more dynamic, more engaging for the students. So let's say you're on the platform where you know we're looking for reading future, develop, and let's look into the third book here. Okay, so we can click through and we're into the book itself straight away. So what I'd like to do is talk about a bit of the functionality of Santaklás and how we're going to use it in relation to the book. So there's a few different things we can do. We can find the specific units very easily. So when you have the book open, you don't have to search through the whole book. You can just jump wherever it is that you want to be. We can also look at this in thumbnail form. So very quickly you can find the topic that you're looking for. And again, this is where the bold images really do help. And here we have a pen. So we can really get involved in the text. So before, if you're using a board, maybe you need to write everything up. But here you can just highlight the different sentences that you're interested in. A student wants to know about something specific, and you can very easily highlight that for the class. So everybody can look at it, you can discuss it together. So very useful tools we can use here, and then we can also erase. So I'll do that now. And up here there's another very important tool, which is the links tool. Now if you remember before, we can use the YouTube icon. We can click through to watch our video. We can do exactly the same thing with links that you choose. So when you're preparing for your lesson, you may want to add different links. So for example, here we're talking about cloning, and here we have a picture of Dolly the sheep. Now you've got a few questions. Who is this? Maybe the students know a little bit, maybe they don't. What you can do is you can go on YouTube, you can find a video there. Let's just say this is the video you want. You can copy the link across very easily. You can add that link. Let's just call it Dolly. And the link's ready to go. So you can place this here. This will be saved up when you come into the lesson. Open everything up, and at the right moment you can just click straight through to your video. So this is very useful, and it can really help you to add extra multimedia and different things to your class, which will really illustrate what you're talking about. And again, you can do this looking at articles online. Maybe you found a news story, something like this, which really helps to illustrate what you're talking about. Okay, so we'll come back to those links a bit later, and again these are very useful for the projects, and it's something the students can really get involved in, and you can really help to build up their digital literacy within class, which is one of the core aims when we're talking about 21st century skills. Let's move back into it. So if we talk about the sidebar here, we have a few more important functions. Firstly, we can play the audio here, and you've got all the tracks. Or equally, you can play the audio on the book itself. So next to each audio symbol,
Unit 4.
You can just play the tracks straight from here. So it makes it a lot easier than getting the CD out, perhaps using the CD player or however else you might do this. And the other thing we can do here is look at supplemental materials. Now this is something I really encourage you to use if you haven't been so far, because we have a lot of content here which is really going to help you in your class. It's going to help you test all of the skills that we were learning in class, and it's going to help you test their knowledge at the end. Let's talk a little bit about this. I can't talk about everything today, but I want to talk about a few core things. But I encourage you to explore this on your own, really download them, take a look and see what it can do for you. So one thing we have here which is very useful is the syllabus. So say you're planning your term, you have 2 lessons a week or you have 3 lessons a week, you want to know how to split up, break up the units, the book, so that you can cover that time. This is the place to start. So if you open this up, you can download, and we won't look at that. We won't open that now, but very easy, just download directly from here, open that up, take a look. It's really going to help you with your planning, and that's something we've really tried to help with. Equally, we can say that about the lesson plan, how to break down the tasks. So we'll tell you a little bit more about what we've talked about today, how to use the different tasks, the flow of the lesson. And next I'd like to talk about a couple of different things which we can use in class or we can use as tests. So here we have something called the writing worksheets. We have 3 different types. We have dictation, we have translation, and let's take a look at some of those. Okay. So here we have the dictation sheet, so you can get this in PDF or Word form, you can download both. And what's great here is this is a listening exercise, and you can use a QR code to listen to the track immediately here. So again, you don't have to mess around finding the unit or finding the track number. All very easy, all very intuitive. So the students will listen, and then they just have to write in the keywords. So here we've got 10 different words they need to fill in. So both keywords from the unit and other words which may be new to them or are very important for this topic. So this is a very useful task you can do in lesson, you can do as a test of the skills and of the vocabulary gained in the lesson. So we're talking about listening, we're talking about spelling. So this adds a lot to what you can do. And another piece I'd like to talk about here is our review test. So we have different types of tests. We have tests for each unit. We have a review test which covers a number of units, for example, unit 1 to 4. We have a midterm test and we have a final test. And they follow this kind of pattern. So we're testing the vocabulary, again using that imagery that the students have seen in class. They've got to choose the correct word. And again here they've got to match the image to the correct piece of vocabulary. And then we move through and we have gap fills using the different vocabulary in context, and we have a few different tasks like that. And then we move through to reading. So these are readings that the students are familiar with. These are the passages from the book itself. And then we have different questions about the same texts. So these are going to be questions that are new to the students. It's going to test their understanding of the passage. And so we have a few of those. Okay. So let's move back. Excuse me. Yes. Okay, so we're back here on Santa Claus. So those were the core things I wanted to talk about. But as I said, really take a look there. We also have something called tips and ideas. Now, it might be easy to overlook this part here, but I would really suggest taking a look at tips and ideas. Inside, they have background knowledge. So as a teacher, sometimes you open the book, you don't necessarily know a lot about the topic. You don't know about all the topics. So what you need to do, or what you can do, is take a look in here. In this folder, it has more information about each topic. And that can be really useful. Just a 2-3 minute read, but it gives you a lot more to talk about with the students, kind of background, and it may help you answer some of the questions the students may have. So I really encourage you to take a look in there. Okay, and the other thing we have here is the answer key. Again, very important. So you can download this, you can print this out. But the other thing you can do on Santa Claus, if we come up here, is all of the answers are available on the page. So as a class, open it up on the whiteboard and you go through it, and then you check the answers as you go through. So very intuitive, very easy to use, and very easy for the students to understand. It can be difficult. You're reading out the answers if one student isn't listening properly. If it's there up on the board, no confusion. So yeah, definitely a great tool. Again, we have the QR code on the page itself. So if you want to find the audio, you can just scan the QR code. So many ways that you can get to that. Okay. So let's go back to the presentation itself. Excuse me, here we are. Okay, so again, I just wanted to go back to the project, and I wanted to show how we can use Santa Claus and the project together. I think this works really well. So let's think about the project itself. This is a very important, very core part of the book. It's really utilizing all of the knowledge that the students have gained through the lesson, watching the videos, doing the listening, and it allows them to really think freely. And this is really the aim of 21st century skills. It's really what we want the students to be doing. So let's take a look at this example. What kind of fossil is it? Okay, so let's go back to Santa Claus and we'll really dig into this. Okay, here we are. So I know that this is Unit 2. So this is how to make a fossil. The students have spent the whole lesson thinking about fossils, what they are, how they're made, and all of the details surrounding it. Now, let's skip ahead to the project section. Okay, so we have our first step one. We have pictures of different bones and different fossils, and we need to match them to the different animals. Now, for some students, they may know what these animals look like. This may be very intuitive, very easy, and for some students a little more difficult. Again, this is where communication and collaboration comes in. But what's great is you can add a link here, and let's say you want to know what a mammoth looks like. So this might be new to the students. And this is where we can really talk about digital literacy. You can show them how you go through this process. So going to Google, we can put we can type mammoth in, and we can look for some images, and here we have lots of different images of mammoths. You can just click through to one, you can copy the link up, you can drop that link in, we pop mammoth in there, your link's ready to go. So you can really include the students in this, and you can even get some students up to the e-board. You can get them doing the searching, and you can get them to place the links, and it's really showing them how to do these searches, how to find this information. And again, this is very useful. The second part is you're finding 5 interesting facts about one of these creatures, one of these animals. So again, we're talking about doing searches, let's say mammoth, top 5 facts, for example. So again, something you can really include the students in. We immediately have some quick facts here, we have a link, and we have many different options. So you can show them how you search, how you're finding information, how you find trustworthy sources. And again, as we discussed, you can prepare these all before the lesson. So really you can create this however you like. But yep, very intuitive, very easy to use, and really building on those 21st century skills that we discussed earlier. Okay, so okay guys, and the last thing I want to talk about here was the class booster. So again, another one of our digital tools that we can use with the class. And so with each of the books you have access to Class Booster. So this is a platform, a program where there's lots of different games and activities which really help to reinforce the knowledge. So I've just got one example for you here, which is a word match. So it's timed and we're matching the words and the pictures that the students learn in class. So again, we're adding a kind of gamification, we're adding a sense of competition. So this is very good for students to use at home. It's also something that you can use in class. You could get the students up to the board, maybe in teams, and you could do a short competition. So you're adding again another engaging element, something which can really help the students to enjoy the class and to learn from the class. Okay, so again, this is something you should really take a look at, really explore the different functions, explore the different games here. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is, if you have any questions, please send them across. I think we're at that point now. We've covered most of the points that I want to cover. So please send any questions in and we'll do our best to answer them right now. Okay. So just to remind you, let's think about what we covered today, and this might help you remember some of the questions you might have had. So we talked about the case study, so the first impressions as a student. How would you look at this book as a student? What would it mean to you? How would it engage you? What questions would it make you ask? And then we talked about the series overview. So develop part of one series, which is a great way for the book to develop with the students and the students to develop with the book itself. And it's very consistent, so the students will become familiar with the way you want them to think, the way you want them to question themselves, the way you want them to question the passages. So it's very consistent, very scalable over a number of years. And we talked about the concepts, so very important, 21st century skills, one of our keywords there, and the 4 C's, which is really what the projects are about. We talked about different tasks, how to use them, and really the flow of the unit, how to use the unit, how to use the workbook, and talked about the projects, which for me is really one of the cores of the book, really one of the most interesting, the most fun parts of the book, and it really draws in those concepts, 21st century skills, digital literacy, really getting the students involved and getting them thinking freely, using those kind of using those kind of intellectual techniques you taught them throughout the lesson. Digital materials, again, please get on to Santaclass, check out those digital materials, check out those supplementaries, a lot that you can add to the class from there. So just take a bit of time, explore it and see what you can do. Okay, so that's everything. Let me take a look at some of your questions.
There's one question about
Yes.
from Jian Kim.
Understand. I see. So if we're talking about, as I understand it, your question is if they don't know the meaning, if they don't know the translation of the word, perhaps it's difficult to teach. I think this is a core part of having the images in the book. And I think the images give an idea of the meaning of the word. And then when we look at the text itself, then we can find the meaning in the sentences. I think as we learn English, or we learn any language naturally, we hear a word, we hear it in context, we see it in context, and then we learn the meaning that way, rather than being told, for example, a translation. So I think this works well, using images and using a passage which is at the correct level for that level of student is the best way for them to learn new words, because they'll learn it by seeing and by understanding it in its context. Okay. Yeah, and as I see another comment there, that's exactly right. If you need the word list, English, Korean translations, those are all available on through our supplementary materials on Santaclass. So those are all completely available. If you feel you need them in the class, then they're there. Okay, let me.
What about make them to guessing the words from the context? Do you think that's a good skill?
Yeah, I think guessing words from context, I think for this level, using the pictures and directly matching is the best. So they are using the context to guess the words, but then the support structure's all there. So then you have the listening, which gives the order of the words with the correct pictures. So you're first asking students to engage and to really think about what they know already. What are the meaning of these words? What does the passage say that really helps me to understand? And then the support network's there. If they didn't know already, then they're going to know by the end of the class. So it works in both ways, I think. Okay, let me just take a look at some of your other questions here. Yep, I think another comment we saw using the class card app. So again, this was available in that supplementary list we looked at earlier. Similar to Class Booster in some ways, this has some activities, some games for students to practice the vocabulary, matching meaning, and on there they also have a matching task of translations as well with Korean. So that's very useful in this case, so please check that out. Yeah, good question. So I'm seeing this question here. Do the readers, as I understand it, will the students be able to understand all of the language within the passages? Now, we've leveled these passages, so the new vocabulary are things that perhaps they don't know and they can learn from context. The rest of the passage is written at the correct level, so the students should understand the general meaning of the text. There may be a few other words in here that they need help with, but again, learning from context, and again using those tools we talked about. If there's a word here that you find with your class they're struggling with, you can find a link online, you can take them through there, and using those other supplementals, you can look at the translations and things like this. Okay, thank you guys. Thank you for all of your questions, and I hope I've been able to answer some of them. and I hope in future we can answer more of your questions. So thank you very much for listening today, and I hope you all have a great day. Thank you.
Compass Publishing.